live the Worldwide Rally for Freedom in Sonora, California. We had a lot of beeps coming through right then, but we had a good show for you today. I'm going to get through some links real quick here. So I'm not going to do a whole separate show for, the links. So I'll be posting these links in the description of the video once I post it around to YouTube, all of that. But just give me a sec. Let me share out this event really quick so we can get it going on Facebook. Alright, so as you guys know, the COVID situation, the vaccine situation has been getting crazy the last couple of weeks. As you guys know, Biden just, signed a mandate saying the federal workers need to, get vaccinated by November 12th, I think. I could be wrong on that. But we got some good links to get through real quick before they get started up here. We're going to be starting with a prayer, and then we're all going to sing Star Spangled Banner, so it should be a good time. But so if they cut me off in the middle of this, I'll get through it, eventually. So anyways, first story I want to share with you guys. Obviously, most of you guys know this if you're from California, but the first one is from the LA Times. You will now have to show vaccine proof at LA nightclubs and bars, how it will work. So, basically, bars, wineries, breweries, nightclubs, and lounges in much of Los Angeles County will require proof of COVID-19 vaccination under a new health order to be issued Friday. So, you have to have at least one vaccine dose by October 7th and be fully vaccinated by November 4th in LA. So, I know there's a lot of people that went in, got their first shot, and then got, sicker. I actually know a lot of people personally that got sick from the first shot, and they're not going in for the second shot. So all those people would not be considered fully vaccinated by LA County. They're going to be denied service in not only restaurants but bars, basically anywhere in civil society, So it's insane what they're doing, and they're doing this all around the country. What's going on here? Under the new order, participants and workers at outdoor mega events with more than 10,000 attendees will also need to provide proof of vaccination or show that they've recently tested negative for COVID. Also starting October 17th or 7th is the requirement that's already in place. That's different. But basically, LA's going just as crazy as New York with the vaccine mandate stuff. I mean, I'm not vaccinated. I've already had COVID. I have the antibodies, so I'm not going to get the vaccine. So I am effectively barred from going anywhere in San Francisco, LA, and as we'll see, Washington State now. So just a couple more points from this article here. So not only LA have been doing this, but San Francisco and Berkeley have also required vaccine mandates, and they said they're requiring customers 12 and older, so everybody 12 and older in Berkeley and San Francisco. Other than that, we got Contra Costa County doing the same kind of thing, Palm Springs doing the same kind of thing. The LA City Council wants to do another step of the vaccine mandate, so it's just, not only we have a county order, but you have a city order, so there's no way to get away from these things, Anyways, that's the first article. It's from LA Times, just explaining the vaccine mandate down there in LA that's about to start. It's very unfortunate. Personally, I'm not going to be able to go to the LA if I don't have vaccine. So it's just insane. I never saw it at a point in my life where I wouldn't be able to go places. Like, I've been talking with someone I know that, I'm going to go on trips with, and it's like, we're not going to be able to go on trips if we're not vaccinated. Like, the whole state of Washington, this is going to be our next article that I'm going to show you guys. The whole state of Washington is requiring a vaccine mandate. So you won't be able to go in bars, restaurants, gyms, anything there, basically. It requires one. And, if you're a business, then you'll get fined, thousands of dollars. It's so tyrannical, and it hasn't been passed through the legislature. This is a mandate from the executive, and it is not lawful. He can do executive orders with things that don't involve the populace. That's probably the wrong way of saying it, but there are certain things you can use executive orders for, and certain things you can't for. And this is not one of them. He's using OSHA as his legislative arm of the executive body, which is completely unconstitutional. But our Constitution is basically paper at this point. That's all it is. If you're not out here holding it up, it's just going to get taken away. Anyways, going on to our next article here. So this is from the Seattle Times. And again, I'll post all these links when I get the video up. But thousands of Washington state workers seek exemptions from the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. So that it's not just the city or county, it's the whole state of Washington. really sad, but let's get into it. So there's been resistance to it. So the resistance sparked demonstrations in Olympia and a lawsuit by dozens of Washington State patrol troopers and others who contend that the mandate violates their constitutional rights, which it does, and exceeds Inslee's legal authority, Jay Inslee, he's the governor. And at the same time it continues, there are concerns that an exodus of state workers could hinder core functions of government, from the ferry system and WSP to the state's prisons and social service programs. And this is exactly the point. They want the economy to just fall apart, and they understand that that's exactly what's going to happen to government workers. So they're allowing a bunch of exemptions for their people, but they aren't for any private workers. The double standard of it. It makes me insanely angry and mad. This can't even go on, and people are okay with it. I mean, you had that one video out in New York of this guy and his kids trying to get into a restaurant. They can't because they don't have their vaccine. And he says, is this the America you want to live in? All these fucking people are like, yes. I can't for the life of me understand anybody like that who would want to control someone else that much. It's just, we've already went through this multiple times on this program. I've shown you the statistics on COVID-19. I've showed you how it's a cold virus that's bad for old people. You have all these fucking petty tyrants out here, especially those in school boards, that want to shut down your kids from going to school and making them wear masks all day, when there's only been 400 deaths since the beginning of COVID in America in children under 12. So it's statistically immune. Children are statistically immune. I don't know how many times I can say this, from COVID. So if you have a child, you should not be worried about them dying from COVID. Anyways, yeah, we got lots of people out here driving. If you want to show them the road really quick, it's a very small town we got here. It's just a one road through here. It's pretty cool. But anyways, where was I? The Washington vaccine mandate. So yeah, it's the whole state. So basically, they're giving exemptions to their workers that they're not giving to the private industry, which is going to cause the biggest resignation of the workforce in this country that we've ever seen. Mark my words, that's going to happen in a couple weeks here. Once all these people are going to be on the line and get fired or have their vaccination, you guys are going to see what the economy looks like after that. It's going to look exactly how the Biden administration and how these cronies in the fucking government want it to look. They want us all to be scared. They don't want us to they don't want us out here, especially, speaking for our rights and standing up for them, and actually doing something. It's not doing much getting out here and just, protesting, but it's something. Never say that you can't do anything, because even the smallest thing is, making a sign or signing a petition. That makes a huge difference. Everybody says to vote. Of course, voting is important, but there's a lot of other stuff you can do before that. Anyways, we'll continue on the Washington State thing. So this is the big one that got me. So even if workers are granted an exemption, they can still be fired if accommodations can't be found for them in less public-facing situations or positions. So basically, they can give you the exemption. You can file for a religious or a medical exemption, and you'll still get fired because they won't be able to find a position for you that's less public than your position that couldn't have it. So it's just, it's like, I don't know how to explain to other people how insane that idea is, that you could get an exemption, so you're exempt from this stuff and still be fired because the government or wherever else couldn't find a spot to put you. It's disgusting what they're doing, and this is why we're out here to protest these vaccine mandates. That's why we were out here a year ago protesting stuff like this, and it hasn't gotten any better. It's only gotten worse. And we really need to stand up and do something. Anyways, so it continues on here with the numbers of the exemptions that were granted. So of those exemptions, I think there was 4,000 requests about 700 were granted, but accommodations were made for only 7 workers. So hear that, out of 700 people, you only had 7 people that actually got the accommodation. So it's just, I don't know how they can give out these exemptions and still say that you're fired. Like, it's just, an exemption is an exemption. If you can't give the exemption, then it's not an exemption. That's not the definition of the word. So it's like, I don't know what they're going to try to do here. But anyways, that's all we had from Washington. So basically, from my perspective, I won't even be able to go to Washington anymore because of the vaccine mandate, like I said earlier. Because, driving through, you won't be able to stop at a restaurant. You won't be able to stop at a gym. You won't be able to stop at, anywhere basically that you want to go that's that's conducive to civil society, you know, and so basically it's just going to keep me away from the state, and I feel like that's exactly what's going to happen to here in Oregon. It's just going to become a bigger thing, and hopefully not nationally, because then there's really going to be a fight that we got to make. But anyways, hopefully it doesn't happen here. That's why we're out here. We're going to get to some good news from the New York vaccine mandate. So this is out of New York One, local news station there. So a judge temporarily blocks New York vaccine mandate for healthcare workers seeking religious exemptions. So this is really good. So a federal judge in upstate New York Tuesday temporarily blocked the enforcement of New York's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers seeking a religious exemption to the requirement. So the judge sided with a group of medical professionals. This is the important part here. These are not random people, you know, speaking up for their rights. You know, although you do have a right. You have, let this guy do his thing. But you have civil rights that you need to speak up for. They will be taken away. Anyways, the point I wanted to bring up here, that this is a group of medical professionals that are challenging this law in New York City. These aren't random people. These are medical professionals, microbiologists, virologists, medical, like doctors, all this, that want a different way to handle this COVID situation. Because there is a better way to do it without locking everybody down, without being an authoritarian tyrant like Biden has been. Like, I didn't think the Biden administration was going to be good, but after that speech he gave last week, I mean, I almost have material for a whole episode on just that. How much tyranny is fucking spewing from that man's mouth. Anyways, yeah, so that's some good news out of New York. We had a judge bar the requirement, and this next article is actually some more good news until we get into the really bad news from Australia. So it's from Bloomberg. Previous COVID prevents Delta infection better than a Pfizer shot. Here, I'll say it again. Having COVID before prevents Delta infection better than a Pfizer shot. And let me get into it. People who recovered from a bout of COVID-19 during one of the earlier waves of the pandemic appear to have a lower risk of contracting the Delta variant than those who got 2 doses of the vaccine from Pfizer and BioNTech. So that you can be fully vaccinated out there, and you can be less protected than someone who got the virus naturally and had natural antibodies. As a microbiologist, I understand this. This is the stuff we learned in school. And it's like, vaccines aren't bad. I'm going to say it. I've said it before. I've said it again. Vaccines aren't bad. It's just, it shouldn't be forced on people. People should have this decision to make with their own health, decisions. God, redundant, but anyways. Let's continue along with this one. So this is where it comes. The largest real-world analysis comparing natural immunity gained from an early infection to the protection provided by one of the most potent vaccines currently in use showed that reinfections were much less common. Sorry, we got some cars going through here. We'll get the sign up. Woo! Kind of loud out here. Can't really keep talking the whole time. Anyways. I love it. So this came out of some research from Israel, I believe. Yeah, this is out of Israel. So, which is actually one of the best countries to look at this sort of stuff right now, because they have the highest percentage of people vaccinated there out of the population. I think, out of any state. I could be wrong on that, but it could be the highest vaccinated country in the world right now. And they found from that research, it's starting, so we'll get back to this. We'll give the attention to the protest holders. So,
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day that you have made. Thank you that you are life, that you are love, you are freedom. And that freedom is the very atmosphere of heaven. And that tyranny is the atmosphere of hell. And I thank you for every one of your daughters and sons that have come out this day. And we join our hearts and our voices with our brothers and sisters, your other daughters and sons around this state, across this nation, and around this globe. Thank you for the voices that are rising. Thank you for what time it is. Thank you for what you're going to do here today. And I speak life and blessing and peace upon every single one of the deposits of heaven that you have placed inside each and every one of those of us here. And that none of us are each other's enemies. The enemies of all of our souls are the ones behind all of the tyranny. And I thank you that you are going to expose, even as your word says, everything that has been hidden will be revealed. And that truth will prevail. And heaven will prevail. So we thank you and we bless you. And we ask all these things in the glorious and mighty name of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
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 I'd like to all invite you to join us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Woo! That's right.
And now we'll have a singing of the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, let's get it. Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say can the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
I'd like to introduce a fellow truther and patriot and friend, David Dennis.
Thank you, Richard. That was quite well done. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Can you all hear me now? Is that okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm David Dennis. I'm from Sonora. I'm one of the organizers of this event today, and I'm very grateful and thankful to see you all out here, because this means that we obviously share an outlook and a motivation. And that motivation is that okay, there we go.
There you go, that's all better,
Where
yeah.
was I? Motivation?
Yeah.
We have the same motivation, and that motivation is that we would like to see the freedom of our nation preserved. Because it's quite clear, I think, to all of us here today that that's being eroded, that's being attacked, that's being taken away from us, and there's not much we can do about it besides sit home, have that anxiety, have that fear, have that anger. And I think we're all tired of that perspective on it, that we want to do something. They told us that our way of doing something is to go to the voting box, take your votes to the ballot box. That's how you get your causes recognized. That's how you get your, laws that you need or your freedoms preserved. That's not so much happening right now. Everybody kind of knows that we have entered the digital age fully, and that includes those votes as well. And that's one of those things that's kind of easily manipulated, and we can't control because of our perspective and our position on it. But I also would like to tell you that even though that sounds pretty bad, and that's the reason for our anxiety and our hopelessness and our anger, that there's actually things that we can do, and that there's people that are already doing these things across our nation, across our world, to push back on what's being done to us. And it's not getting angry, It's not going home and getting your guns. It's not going out and fighting with people who disagree with you. It's about coming together with the people who will stand next to you, who will bear the burden with you and will carry forward, because at this point in time, we have to do this ourselves. We have to take it upon ourselves, and then we're going to show them how we do that. So if you have any interest in participating in this, please come and leave us your contact information, the way you would like to be contacted, possibly your skills, short bio, whatever way you would like to interact and be interacted back with. We want to recruit you into the cause. This is the call to come together and do things. We want to bring people together to do things, to get our freedom back. Thank you so much. That's pretty much all I have to say on that. I appreciate you all being here. Do not give up. Do not let them drag you down. Look at all of us. There's more than we thought. Thank you.
Woo.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Suzanne Cruz. Suzanne is a longtime resident of Tuolumne County. She's a world traveler. She's moved as far as the country of Greece and then years later to Pennsylvania, where she was trained as a conservative activist by the prestigious Leadership Institute in Arlington, Virginia.
Woo!
The Leadership Institute has been responsible for training well-respected Americans such as Congressman Dan Crenshaw and Vice President Mike Pence. Her book, 3 Months in Pennsylvania, Diary of a Freedom Fighter, recounts 3 months infiltrating liberal universities and rescuing students from leftist harassment. Suzanne later went on to found the Leadership Institute USA, and she ran a bookstore and event center right here in downtown Sonora. Designing and presenting a Constitution Day celebration every September 17th for families was the highlight of her program. To learn more about Suzanne, go to SuzanneCruz.com. But without further delay, let's welcome Suzanne Cruz.
Thank you so much. All right, I know how to use a microphone. All right, how many of you in the audience have heard of the Golden Triangle of Freedom? Raise your hand if you have heard of this.
I think so.
Most people have not heard of the Golden Triangle of Freedom. We're going to begin this presentation with the word freedom, and this is audience participation. So anytime you hear the word freedom, I want you to call back to me. Freedom. Here we go. Freedom.
Freedom!
Very nice. Smartest audience I've ever talked to. Here we go. A president said this once: freedom,
Freedom!
awesome, is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day, we will spend our sunset years telling our grandchildren what it was once like in the beautiful land of America, where people were once free. How many of you remember that famous quote? What president said that? Ronald Reagan. You win a prize. It's a free book. When you're done, go over there to the John Birch Society and pick up your free book, 3 Months in Pennsylvania. Here we go. Audience participation. Keep your ears open. Freedom.
Freedom!
These are great. To invent, work, and prosper is what has made this country so great. Greater than any other nation on earth, because it was here in this land that we unleashed the energy and the individual genius of a man to a greater extent than has ever been done before in the history of the world. A vital component to freedom, you guys are great, is the dignity of the human individual. It must be recognized first. And that has been more available and ensured here in the United States than in any other place on earth. A deeply Christian nation, the dignity of the human individual is what St. John Paul II wrote so much about after the Second World War and witnessing the tyranny of the Nazis and the communists. The price for freedom, amazing, has been high. But we Americans have never been shy about shedding our blood. Why, the hills of Arlington are filled with little white crosses with stars of David. and other testaments to our freedom that we have fought for. One thing we must realize is that there is no arsenal in the arsenals of the world that is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. Our enemies do not have this, but we do. So the question is, how do we secure our freedom today? Here we go. Here's your answer. We have to look for leaders that understand the concept of the dignity of the human individual. What is the smallest minority in the earth?
The individual.
Because only he or she will understand how our form of government works. The United States is a self-governing republic. We are not a democracy, we are a self-governing republic. The dignity of the individual affords us this right. Now, there are 3 documents that ensure this freedom. They are known as the Great Charters of Liberty. Please tell me what the Great Charters of Liberty are. There are 3 of them. Go ahead for a free book again.
Life, liberty, and property.
3 documents.
Oh, never mind.
3 documents. Declaration of Independence, yes. What is the second one? The Bill of Rights, yes. Third one, Constitution. Those are known as the Golden Charters of Freedom. We have to, thank you. We have to find leaders or be those leaders that understand those 3 documents. All right, let's talk about virtue. Because I said, in the Golden Triangle of Freedom, in order for freedom to exist, is you must have people who are virtuous, who are faith-filled, and this is the recipe to keep freedom alive. So you have to have virtuous people for this to survive. Now, when I was traveling in Pennsylvania, I came across the story of a young boy who in 1745 had a school assignment, and he wrote 110 rules of civility. These rules ranged from the banal, like don't throw your bones and empty wine glasses under the table, to rule number 43, which is make sure that you treat people with respect who are around you. History remembers him as a man of virtue and strength. He was a surveyor and our first president. Who am I speaking of?
G. Wash.
Smart audience. His constituent, John Adams, wrote, quote, "Our Constitution was made for only a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to those of any other." America is a free republic, a self-governing people, which all of you are. To be self-governing, you must be virtuous, moral, ethical, upright, honest in dealing with each other. Our founders, if you remember your history, were sick of a British king telling them what to do. And what do we have today? A California king telling you what to do. So do not forget your history. Think about what they always want next. So it's not just forced vaccinations. What's the next step? You always have to think, what is next? How about global warming? Here's your tax bill, your carbon tax bill. Or you're too old, you need to be euthanized. Or how about being forced to buy a green energy car? It is always the force that is in direct opposition to freedom. Let's talk about faith in our Golden Triangle. We think of the framers as revolutionaries, and they were, but they were also rooted in that they were using history to defy history, because they knew if you look to the classics, a free society never exists. It doesn't last for long. So they wanted to create a perpetual equivalent of a free country that would last forever. That's incredible. And a lot of people think they created the Constitution, that would make it happen. But it wasn't. It's not law alone that will get you your freedom.
Freedom.
Should we wait for them to pass, or do you want me to go?
Keep going.
Hey, everybody wait. Okay. So it wasn't just the Constitution that was going to grant us this kind of country. Then they thought maybe if it's everyone's just virtuous, everyone just be nice to each other, that's how we'll get our freedom. No. Awesome. They knew it was going to take faith you had to have that component in it. Faith, you had to have a relationship with your creator, someone above man. And if you think of Pol Pot and other dictators, they thought they were God. And that's why it's important and vital that you have to have a God above man. There is that freedom component.
Freedom!
Not by force has it been done since the beginning of time. The early Christian colonists, hearts filled with faith, that have given their freedom, would gladly carve out a life for themselves. Now, here is a really fascinating fact as we wind this up. Did you know that it's estimated that 155,000 American colonists died of disease, in battle, and starvation, and only 24,000 British soldiers? How did we win? When we lost 155,000 and they only lost 24,000. I'll tell you why. They say it was a colonial army, but it was not really. It was, as I said before, free men and women. And one thing we have to realize, there's no arsenal, there's nothing that they have out there against us that is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women such as yourselves.
Freedom! Right.
Now remember, the British Army, okay, they were not free. This is a huge revelation. They were not free. They lacked the will to fight. We're all free. That's why we're here in unity together, because we have it in us. We love that freedom. We're going to do anything for it. God, you're right there. Faith cannot be forced through government decree, because faith of any sort requires
Freedom!
If faith is preserved, has a chance of surviving. In closing, the golden triangle of
Freedom!
requires virtue. You have to be virtuous. You jumped the gun. And you have to be faithful. You have to be faith-filled people. And go home, Google it, find out, learn more about this triangle. And I'm going to leave you an acronym, okay? Never, ever, ever cave. Okay? C for conviction. Be convicted in these truths that we've discussed today. A for articulate. Find a few good quotes, pieces of history, memorize them. These are your weapons. Visible. Keep on organizing events like these. Get a bumper sticker. Put up a yard sign. Take up space. And energetic. Be energized and invigorated by those leaders who have gone before and those who are around you right now. Do all of these things, but do not cave to those that would take your freedom. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Woo!
Okay, I'd like to introduce now, would like to welcome Darren Duez. He will be running for Sonora City Council. He and his family are from Tuolumne County, and he would love your vote. Come on, Darren.
How's it going, guys? I don't do this very often, so bear with me. Show me a man with no enemies, and I'll show you a man that's never stood for anything. Show me a man that has no enemies, and I'll show you a man that's never stood for anything.
Woo!
We're not calling for freedom. We're declaring we already have it. The amount of division that's upon us is ruining our amazing community. We come together.
Lots of
We come together in times of
outside.
honor, times of strength, times of devastations. Instead of division.
Big joke. Yeah.
One more. Instead of division, we need unity. Many soldiers put their lives and lost their lives for the freedoms we have today. We need to go back to a better time of logic. We don't all have to agree, we all don't have to align an ideology, but logic's got to run it. The moral direction that we're getting from city council, from the boards. It's not on the same moral as everybody. They're doing their best, but the elitism that some of these people have, they need to be replaced. I'm running for city council to do that.
Woo!
This city deserves better. During the time of the pandemic, the businesses here were left to fend for themselves. The upper echelon didn't reach out, didn't do anything, didn't try to help, didn't try to do anything to facilitate business staying in business. A little more power.
I know, right?
Politicians around here just sat on their hands. We can't have that. We got to have people stand up. There was a lot they could have done, and they just fell real short. We need them gone. The Constitution wasn't written to control the people, it was written to control the government.
Woo!
I will work for you, the people. Vote for me. Save this city. Thank you. Darren Duez, vote for me.
Woo!
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Brooke Mose. Brooke Mose is from Angels Camp. His background is in pastoral ministry, Christian education, university professorship, concert violin performance, human rights advocacy, international affairs and relief work, international travel, pedagogy, and we are honored to have you as our next speaker. Please help me introduce Brooke Mose.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to pull this up a little taller because I'm a little taller. 1 second. Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I'm a college professor and Christian pastor by trade. Don't hold the college professor part against me. But confirmed teacher. And I want to tell you a story this morning, a story with a moral. And it's a story about empires. And it's a little bit of history involved. So in 1453, Constantinople was the last bastion of Christianity in the Eastern Roman Empire, and it was the defender of the outer gates of the Western civilization. And freedom at the time was surrounded and besieged by the armies of the Ottoman Turk, Mohammed II. And suddenly from the walls there came a cry of terror: the Janissaries are coming. Now that's not a familiar word to us in this century, but in the 15th century, this was the term that was given to Christian children who during the invasion of the Eastern Roman Empire were kidnapped by the Ottoman Turks, and they were indoctrinated into an absolute denial of the Christian faith and of the history of freedom that was their birthright. And they were brainwashed, and they were armed with bright swords and taught the merciless brutality of the Ottoman warfare. And in 1453, Constantinople was besieged, as I said, and after many weeks, the defenders were exhausted, and the Turks broke through the walls, and the slaughter began. As the defenders were fleeing for their lives out of the back of the city, Mohammed II, in a masterful stroke of cruelty, ordered his elite force of 20,000 Janissaries, the very children of the fleeing descendants who now hated the freedom-giving light of the empire and were now fanatical haters of Christ, and he ordered them to charge. And thousands died in agony at the hands of their own children, who had forgotten the light of freedom passed down from their ancestors. The Janissaries had come and the Eastern Roman Empire fell, never to recover again. Well, let me take you back another 1,000 years to the fall of Rome itself, when in 410, after 800 years in which no foreign enemy had ever set foot in Rome, Rome was sacked by the Visigoth king Alaric. In this case, it wasn't the youth of the empire whose minds had been brainwashed into accepting brutality and dictatorship and slavery that led to the destruction of the land. No, it was the government itself and the debauchery of the people of Rome that brought it on. The Roman people were morally bankrupt. Many of their churches no longer preaching truth, their political leaders lost in scandal after scandal, their marriages broken, their youths sexually confused. And the barbarian Goths, who up to that time had paid tribute to the empire, had rebelled against absolute corruption of the Roman government, against crippling taxes, against starvation, against mismanagement of plagues in the empire. And they took their rage to the streets and they burned Rome. And things looked dark for the future of the West, but believe it or not, out of the ashes of the sacking of Rome by Alaric, the beginnings of what would ultimately become American freedom were born. A man named Augustine, who was a pastor in North Africa. He wrote a book, As his contemporary political and religious thinkers went into hiding and depression and gave up, Augustine read his Bible and he wrote a book entitled The City of God. This was the name of the most monumental, maybe the most monumental book in the history of the Free West. While many thinkers had made an idol of Rome and her government and her emperor as the light and the savior of the world, Augustine, who was a Christian, knew that man has original sin and that given humankind's basic corruption, given enough time, even the best governments in the city of man will inevitably tend to turn away from the good which God had ordained them for, and eventually tend towards evil, to organized oppression, to self-aggrandizement, becoming an entity that seeks to maintain its power through threats, coercion, and ultimately violence. St. Augustine gave to the Free West a distrust of government whenever and wherever the state elevates itself to the level of a god, steps out of the commands of the Bible, or the law of nature and of nature's God, as our founders put it, whenever it fails to protect the innocent, to protect individual choice and freedom, and by doing all this, fails to be an instrument of justice and goodness in the world. And by pointing us to the Bible and the concept of the righteous and free city of God, Augustine gave us a moral and philosophical framework by which the heirs of freedom in the West could evaluate when the city of man has become an abode of tyrants. These truths grew and resonated throughout the history of the West as tyrants rose and as tyrants fell, as good men advanced the cause of freedom as the rest of the world slid into darkness. Through the time of Charlemagne and from the 9th century law code of good King Alfred the Great to the signing of the great Magna Carta by King John in 1215, from the natural rights of man before God in the Middle Ages to the highly developed resistance theory against tyrannical government that was born out of the Protestant Reformation, the Free West, leading right down to the time of our founding fathers, developed an understanding of the natural rights of man with which they are endowed by their Creator, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when any government, through a series of usurpations and abuses, attempts to dominate and dictate these natural rights of men and women, it is the right and the duty of the people to just say no. No, you may not command my life in this way. There's a line that may not be crossed, and we, a free people before Almighty God, will not let you cross it. When the king sought to tax the colonists into submission, they said no. When the king sought to quarter troops in homes and restrict movement of the colonists, they said no. When the king insisted on illegal searches and seizures and hampered the free exercise of religion and tried to confiscate arms and sought to silence the freedom to speak out against abuse, the signers of the Declaration of Independence pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors in a promise to bond together and say, no, 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 you may not command my life, you may not command my liberty or property, and you may not command my pursuit of happiness. When Jefferson mentioned happiness in the Declaration, this was his translation of the ancient Greek ideal of eudaimonia, which according to Aristotle was the purpose of life itself, a life of joy, a life well lived. And the Christians who founded our country believed similarly that life's purpose was to glorify God and then to enjoy Him and His benefits forever. This happiness in this world is a life of virtue, peace, kindness, and freedom from oppression. And our founders, building on the Christian heritage of Augustine that had developed over the entire history of the West, knew that government tends to do exactly what our own government is doing now, making slaves of us. I mean, let's be real, a government that can force you to cover your face, restrict free movement, and then inject experimental drugs into your system will do anything. Because we have let them do anything by not just saying no. Their actions are the actions of slave masters who confine you to your homes, tell you how to run your business, shut down your business, tell you in televised presidential speeches that my patience is growing thin. Submit. Just say no. Thanks be to God, our founders made it easier for us to say no. They built in safeguards. First of which, freedom of religion, which is why houses of worship have been so maligned and attacked and sued over the last 2 years. Why governments seeking to control their people always attempt to shut them down. When I was a child, my family used to smuggle into Soviet bloc countries before the Soviet Union fell, into Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Romania. And I remember at the border they would ask you if you had guns and if you had Bibles, right? Because guns give people the means to defend themselves, while Bibles give them the will to defend and the knowledge how to defend. People of deep-seated religious faith will not easily bend the knee to the God of the state. They will not offer a pinch of incense to Caesar and say, Caesar is Lord, I'll do whatever he tells me, when they know in their hearts that Jesus is the Lord. People of deep religious conviction will not surrender their children to experimental drugs when they believe that their children are God's children, given in trust to them. People who believe in the sanctity of life will not take vaccines, so-called, all of which are protein tested in cell lines developed from aborted fetuses. Most of these vaccines are developed using the HEK 293 line. HEK stands for human embryonic kidney, and this cell line was developed from the 293rd abortion in that particular study. If your church needs some more information on this to help you fight for religious vaccine exemption, you can have your pastor contact us at our website, calvarispress.org. But not just religion, the government has done its very best to go after freedom of the press and deny average Americans freedom of speech. And their minions in the tech world aid them in this effort. Twitter accounts and Facebook feeds are shut down. Truth is fact-checked and lied about, or at least falsely dissembled into oblivion. Just this week, drone footage from the border that Fox News was shooting, well, the FAA demanded they ground those flights and stop filming. The FAA can't do that. Freedom of the press is guaranteed as the rights of a free people and must not be infringed. Bullying governments around the world do what the Nazis did and what the communists in the Soviet bloc countries did, what the government in Australia did some years ago. They confiscated firearms and other means of defense, and now you can witness what a dictatorship Australia has become. Regarding these jabs and these threats from our president against your bodily autonomy, against your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, get the shot or lose your job. And he says, I have the authority to make all federal employees and private employers over 100 do what I command, which I would say is the very definition of fascism. And regarding the insistence from this presidential administration and of governors who would be little kings that all of our children, whom the studies show have statistically almost zero danger from the COVID virus, with only a few hundred dead in a nation of 350 million, that they be forced to breathe through wet, filthy rags all day long, every school day. And when you were told in televised presidential speeches that patience is growing thin and you should submit, and the vaccinated need to be protected from the unvaccinated because their vaccination isn't protecting them, so get vaccinated, whatever the heck that twisted logic means. And when your free speech is censored by the tech giants and your travel is restricted by the travel giants, and worship of an all-powerful God is restricted by fools of the state who can't even balance their checkbook, when all that happens, it is your right and duty as Americans to just say no. They can't fire everyone. They can't arrest everyone. It's not illegal to refuse experimental medical procedures that violate your conscience and have killed 14,000 plus, according to the government's own statistics, which a University of Chicago study showed may actually only be 1% of the actual deaths. But when also over 600,000 have reported serious medical side effects from the jabs. When all that happens, it's your right and duty as Americans to just say no. It's not illegal to breathe freely. It's not illegal to travel where you want to and meet who you want to, and you have the freedom to put into your body what you want. Medical rape is not protected by the law of this land. So what do, given that totalitarians are trying to own you? Well, C.S. Lewis in his classic The Abolition of Man writes this: for the wise men of old, the cardinal problem of human life was how to conform the soul to objective reality, and the solution was wisdom, self-discipline, and virtue. For the modern, the cardinal problem is how to conform reality to the wishes of man, and the solution is technique, end quote. We live in a world in which the would-be dictators of the world around you are trying to conform reality to their wishes, and they use techniques. They deny science. They cover your mouth literally and figuratively in order to break your spirit. They bully and cajole and threaten job loss. They feed our children with false Marxist and critical race theory garbage philosophy in our schools. And the results over the decades are obvious. Confusion among our youth, fools in power, homelessness at real actual pandemic levels, drugs out of control, pornography and the sex trade flourishing, the creation of an entire generation of janissaries among our children who don't know the heritage of this country, who hate the foundational principles of America, who despise even being an American, and who riot and burn down whole city blocks at a time in places like Portland. The results of the last 2 years are equally obvious. Suicides and depressions way up. the ill treatment and disgracing of our armed forces, freedoms eroded everywhere, generals who are chairmen of the Joint Chief of Staff who commit treason, shenanigans in elections to such a level that many in our land don't even trust elections anymore. Worst of all, our own president gives speeches that pit one group of Americans against another, warning you that your fellow Americans are dangerous and they could kill you by just breathing on you, and that they don't care if you die, they're just so selfish. You know, your family members who want to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas together, your fellow church members who are singing praises to God and praying beside you and for you, maybe even the members of your own family, so don't visit grandma in the nursing home. We're in a bad way, and God's judgment is heavy on this land for our insanity and sin. So what is the solution? Because it has to be more than complaining on Facebook. Well, first off, don't surrender like the citizens of Constantinople did in 1453. Never surrender to evil people and bullies. Don't give them 1 inch, because they will always take more. Second, don't run off into the desert to be fearful hermit preppers and weep about the loss of the empire, like so many people did when Alaric sacked Rome. No, instead be a prepper who preps for victory. G.K. Chesterton once said something to the effect that the one taste of paradise on earth is when you fight in a losing battle and you win. Woo. Prep for victory. Prep for victory, and victory starts by drawing boundary lines and not submitting. There are worse things than losing jobs. Just say no. Woo! And hold your head up and defy mandates that are not law and have no force of law behind them. Lawsuits will come about these mandates, they already are. And just like John MacArthur's church in Los Angeles winning a massive settlement from the state for their egregious overreach against that church's religious liberty, your cause will be upheld. And even if it is not, there are things more important than jobs. Jobs come and go. We can help each other through hard times. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are fragile things that must be protected by every generation. So follow your conscience and resist when it tells you to. We have so many political and legal avenues to fight back in this land. Many have been mentioned already by previous speakers. And smile when you resist tyrants. It confuses them so much. Smile when you walk through a public place, maskless.
Damn right.
And mock tyrants. They have the worst sense of humor on planet Earth. The only thing they can't abide is someone who has no fear of them, mocking them for the little tin pot pretended fascists that they are.
That's goddamn right.
And love your neighbor who is hurting and needy and fearful and depressed, especially if you see a child like that. Be the hands and feet of God to your neighbor. And speaking of children, you gotta love the Rolling Thunder. All right. We'll wait a second longer. And speaking of children, train yours in history and truth. Train them in how the history of the West and the laws of this land give them a moral path for resistance and a nonviolent means of removing dictators. Midterm elections are coming up. We saw what happened with the national elections. It's much harder to cheat on midterm elections. And the places where they would cheat, they already own. So use these elections wisely. We don't need to fight in this land, we need to vote. We need to teach, we need to share the gospel of Jesus. At least we don't need to fight yet. Pray Lord it never comes to that. And as you teach your children truth, probably you should pull them out of any Marxist system of educational indoctrination in which they find themselves. Woo! And seek out homeschool and private school help if needed. You can ask me about that afterwards as well if you want. Basically, if you want to preserve freedom for the future, you can't let any modern-day American version of the Ottoman Turks brainwash your children into being the very janissaries who kill you and your future. Oh, and don't lash out at any stupid January 6th storm the Capitol style ways. It gives the bullies in our government an excuse to bully even more and clamp down on freedoms even more, as the good people who were there get lumped in with the people wearing buffalo headdresses. We get physical and the totalitarians might just spin it as probable causes to clamp down on midterm elections. And above all, worship. The reformer Martin Luther once wrote something. And he penned it just a few short years after the fall of Constantinople to the Turks. He wrote, "If I profess with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God, except that little point which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, I'm not confessing Christ, however boldly I may be professing Christ. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved, and to be steady in all the battlefield besides is mere flight and disgrace if he flinches at that point. The devil and his people hate Jesus because they want to be kings, but the gospel is the announcement that he is the king who has set you free from every yoke of slavery, so never give up worship of the true king." Woo! Never give up your conscience and your religious freedom. If you need help writing a religious exemption request for your employer regarding the vaccine, again, see me afterwards or go to our church's website for information on that. But never give up worship. It's why the pilgrims came here in the first place. It's the very heart of freedom. Worship of God is warfare. Worship of God is to totalitarians and Marxists what water is to the wicked witch of the West. And history shows us that when times get really bad and the state goes so far as to even begin to martyr believers, like is happening currently in Afghanistan right now, even martyrs who died for their faith historically died joyfully singing and with uncowed and free worship. They were thrown to the lions in Rome, and by their resistance, even unto death, they were the very catalyst for the growth of freedom in the West. So never give up your worship. Double down on reading the Bible. It's the source of all hope and wisdom and strength. Never give up your singing. Joyful singing ties spiritual armies together. Woo. Never give up your prayers of personal repentance, because God only listens to the prayers of a humble and repentant people before him. A reformation of truth and liberty in this land starts not with the federal government, but with your individual heart. Love God first, love your neighbor as yourself, defend your freedoms because protecting liberty and life is at the heart of loving your neighbor, and go to church. Don't let anyone bully you into doing something you think is wrong. That is your right and heritage as a free child of the West.
Woo! All right, one sec, guys. They're about to start a little song sing-along, so we're gonna go finish this episode real quick. I just wanted to play so I could finish the links I have for you guys, and then we can just go wave some signs. Okay, so hope you guys liked the few speeches they gave. I really liked them. They gave some purpose for what? Okay, so where were we? So the last one we got through was a Bloomberg article saying previous COVID prevents Delta infection better than the Pfizer shot. Obviously, this is research that's just coming out in the last couple months, and I will provide this link because they do provide links to the original Israeli study that showed original infection antibodies were better than the antibodies that you got from the vaccine. So anyways, some good news. And the last thing I want to go over was a little bit of what the last speaker just talked about. He said the tyranny that's happening in Australia, and he had a point there. You know, if you don't have your guns, if you don't have things to actually protect your freedoms with, you're not going to be able to do anything about them. So I'll bring out some background music here while I finish these finish the last few links for you guys, and we'll just get through it. It's just a couple of stories out of Australia that are really scary. If we don't do something now, we're going down the same path that Australia has. So we've talked about this before on a couple other shows, but our next one is from, the New York Daily News. Hundreds arrested in protests against Australia coronavirus lockdowns. And we've already told you guys about incidents where, Germany, Great Britain, people are getting arrested for actually going out and protesting. People in the West, where you're supposed to have a freedom of speech. You're not supposed to be arrested by tyrannical governments. Anyways, we'll get to the article. Hundreds of people, many of whom are now facing fines for flouting health orders, were arrested Saturday in Australia while protesting in the country's coronavirus lockdowns. This is the point of of the First Amendment and the freedom of speech is to get out when your government says you can't. Because that's the whole point. You get out, you speak out, and you stand up for your rights. And if you don't do that, then your rights will just be trampled over, like what we've been seeing in the U.S. But that's why the U.S. hasn't seen the same things as Australia, because we have people like this that get together, and we're not going to be arrested. At least I would fight back against the cops. I was going to be arrested. Anyways, that's why you have it here in America. That hasn't happened yet, because we have a lot of liberty-loving people that do not want what has happened in Australia to come here. Anyways, that was just a little short one. This is another crazy one. So, I'll just let you guys get a good look at the title of this one. Australian state limits residents of COVID-19 lockdowns apartments to 6 beers per day. This is just insane. I didn't believe this story when it first came out, but they're limiting the beer consumption of people in their, or quarantining in their own homes, which is, if you don't call limiting someone's consumption of beer tyranny, I don't know what is. If you can't just go out and go to the store and buy beer like anybody fucking can in the West, and you can't do that, that means something's fundamentally wrong with what we've been doing with this COVID response. Anyways, so I'll get into the story. So residents in apartment buildings that have been locked down by Australia's New South Wales State Health Department over COVID-19. Sorry guys. Over COVID-19, so say they have had their deliveries searched and have had packages containing alcohol confiscated if the amount exceeds the department's prescribed alcohol limit. So they said that alcohol deliveries policed in accordance with the department's policy, which allows residents to receive a ration. A ration is what they're saying, of 6 beers or pre-mixed drinks, 1 bottle of wine, or 379 milliliters bottle of spirits a day, according to news.com from Australia. So basically, simple story, they're restricting people from buying beer over there. I think if that would ever happen here, you'd have a whole swath, millions of people standing up the instant that happened. But it's odd, you know, because you think of Australia as kind of a bigger drinker society, and apparently they're not doing anything about it. You think they'd want more than 6 beers. I don't know, for me, 6 beers is a lot, but you know, some people think it's a lot. Anyway, that's beside the point. They're limiting beer, and this should be an eye-opener. This is a scary one for those of you who are animal lovers, but this is a story we got out about 2-3 weeks ago. So 15 rescue dogs, including 10 puppies, killed by council in Australia over COVID-19 concerns. So let me just read you the thing. So a local government in the state of New South Wales in Australia faced criticism after reports surfaced. They ordered 15 dogs killed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 among shelter workers. And read the headline again, there are 15 dogs, 10 of them were puppies. They sent authorities out to kill dogs just because they were worried about people getting COVID. I don't know how many times I can say I don't know how many times. Like, it just, each story I look at with this kind of stuff, it's just, it's maddening, it's wild that they could even, that people even put up with this stuff. Like, puppies were killed over this. And I know, you know, think of the, you know, children, it's kind of an argument, but these dogs did not have to die. Literally, they were killed by the state because the state wanted to enforce the order that is unconstitutional and unlawful by the justice that has been brought about by the Western society. It's not lawful. Well, until they actually pass a law about it, then it would be lawful. But until they actually pass a law, it's unlawful. All of these mandates that they're doing. I don't know about Australia. I think it's just executives that are issuing these orders. It's not actually a legislator that's voting on stuff. But I wouldn't put it past me to see the Australian legislature push something like this. Anyways, yeah. And for my last story, this is the scariest one. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but there is concentration camps in Australia. Okay, so we'll get you guys a looky on the article. So, title, it's from, what is this from? It's from 9 News, a local area news around over in Australia. So, new regional quarantine facilities to be built in southern Queensland. Let's get into it. So, the Queensland government is pushing ahead with a 1,000-bed quarantine facility in Toowoomba without the support of the federal government. And the Premier said, basically their governor, if we want to open Australia up, if we want to open our state up, regional quarantine facilities are the answer. These are So these quarantine facilities, they're for anybody coming into the country for 14 days or anybody that has COVID for 14 days. And I wish I could show you guys more, but the way they're running these camps is really scary in a way. Like, you can't put down your mask for even a second at a time when you're eating something. You have bedtimes, you have you have to get up at certain times. It seems like, you know, prison. That's basically what it is. It's temporary prison that they're putting people in. They have no right to be doing that. Just because somebody gets sick with yes, a virus that's world over, but also a virus that we've seen, you know, that most people have antibodies at this point, either from the vaccine or from natural immunity. So we really got to stop, because this is where we're going. We're going to concentration camps. On my last show, this wasn't happening. But in between that time, only a couple months, now Australia has camps. They have camps where they're putting people. It's scary. So let me go on with this article and then we'll be done. So guests would be flown into the adjacent Wellcamp Airport pending federal government approval, or alternatively bust in from Brisbane. And they said, the Premier said, we need to make sure that we have a good quarantine, a regional facility away from our densely populated cities that can spread the virus rapidly, as we've seen what has happened. Unfortunately, in NSW and of course in Victoria. So basically these are just being built, and they're not, some of these facilities aren't even going to be complete until 2022. So they know this is going to be going on for at least years into the future. They are not going to give up their power, and it's disgusting. And if I have any fans or any people that watch in Australia, get out of the country, because if this is the step that they're taking now, well, you can only imagine what they're going to do in a couple months from now. So get out of the country. We need to start talking about this stuff so it doesn't come here. Basically, that's my point with all this Australia stuff. That's why I wanted to have it at the end there. Is because if we don't stand up for something like we're doing right now, then this whole country will be like the Australian government, locking their people down over a couple cases, over one death I've heard in a state over there. We need to stand up now before this stuff comes here. And I think that should do it. I hope you guys had a good show. I hope you guys learned some stuff from the speakers we had. I guess not we, but the protest that we had here. We had a pretty good show up. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. And I will have this episode up in a couple days here on YouTube, BitChute, all of our other websites. Make sure to tune in. I'll have it all edited and stuff, so you guys don't have to watch the whole thing. Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Keep it spicy.